Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Tina. In today's video, we're going to look at the soul contract of Stephen Twitch Boss. Who is Stephen Twitch Boss? Well, he was an American freestyle hip hop dancer, choreographer, actor, television producer, and television personality. He was on So You Think You Can Dance, Ellen DeGeneres show. That's where he became an executive producer. And he was married and he had two children of his own and one adopted. And just so that you understand, this is going to be a little bit triggering or could be triggering because we will be talking about depression and suicide since Stephen had committed suicide in on December 13th of 2022. He was only 40 years old. So we want to have a little bit of a discussion about that. I did do some creative writing, pulling in Stephen, and I'm going to read that to you. Plus, again, we're going to look at a soul contract, look at the numbers and what was going on there. Then we're going to go a little bit deeper. We'll pull some cards to get some more messages from him, but maybe look at this from your soul's perspective and on, how can something like this happen to us souls when we come here? And is it part of the soul contract? What does that mean? So to start with, let's talk about it from the soul contract perspective. There are parts of the soul contract that are tied into the numbers, so the soul may experience a wide range of emotions. This is a necessary purging process that some souls choose to experience. These are very high highs and very low lows of emotions. It may be because they were not able to acclimate themselves into society and prior lives, so they may choose to come back to work out the issue. If they cannot and choose to leave this world, there is no judgment in this, no shame, no punishment. This is all part of a larger learning process for their soul and the ones they leave behind. So during our incarnations, the soul is always pushing for upgrades as you continue to work through your challenges. And part of this is the integration of the ego, I like to call the little self. And we want to integrate the ego into our higher selves. And this integration can sometimes feel like the ego is dying, but it is just the old version of the self being released. It is often referred to as the dark night of the soul, and it can be very confusing for those who have not yet realized you are not your thoughts. The obsessive thinking becomes out of control. They cannot see any way out of the situation. This obsessive compulsory thinking takes over, and they believe they are the ones who need to die rather than the outdated ego versions of themselves. So, again, how does a person get to this point? Well, I have had some very close experiences in my life with people who have chosen to leave through suicide. Three men, all of them were around Stephen's age, one younger man who was in his 20s. My first exposure was my ex-father-in-law who had a narcissistic collapse and ended up killing his wife and himself. That was a very traumatic event for our family. And then there was my former partner, the father of my youngest daughter, who also committed suicide. And very similar to Stephen, was very, very shocking. It was very unbelievable because of a lot of the similarities that Stephen was showing through his behavior and his acting, like everything was so great. So that can be very shocking. I had a coworker who had was trying to quit smoking and was put on a medication and he started having suicidal thoughts. He did contact his doctor. However, the thoughts took over and they were not able to save him. And then the last exposure that I had was my youngest daughter's boyfriend took his own life. So this has been something that I've been heavily exposed to myself. And so I have nothing but great compassion and empathy and love for the people that are left behind, because they're the ones who are left with putting the pieces together, trying to make sense of it. It's part of this higher learning as well, which can seem extremely harsh and unfair. So again, we have to make sure that we are being our most compassionate, non-judgmental selves when we are talking about people who decide to leave, because it just perpetuates these stigmas and the shame and guilt that follows the people left behind. So we want to be very cognizant of that, even though we're all connected and people around us can have an effect on us. But there is, in this video, this is not about, we're not going to blame others, but I will be talking about trauma. I will be talking about how relationships, how these images get built on these illusions. And so we are going to talk a little bit, but this is not about judging anybody or condemning anybody in any way or putting the blame on them. So I just wanted to make that very clear before I get into, I have some notes over here. So if I'm looking over here when um, I want to read what I had recorded after I had asked Stephen to come through to get his perspective now that he's been on the other side of what is going on with the soul when this is happening. And this is what I recorded from Stephen's perspective. I could no longer carry the burden of the character that I had created and was projecting on the outside. It was stated that I wanted to be everyone's hero, but that is not the truth. I had abandoned myself for the happiness of others in being who I thought I was supposed to be, but it was never enough. I couldn't do enough to keep everyone happy, and I just got extremely exhausted. I was not connecting with my true self. I was not making sure I had time to recharge and time to do those things that were good and healthy for me. Putting on a happy face felt so phony and so heavy. The more I pretended, the more it hurt. It was all about image, image, image. I couldn't see I had the power to change it all. It wouldn't have been pretty or easy, and I would have disappointed a lot of people, but there was a whole new world waiting for me if I just would have talked to somebody that I felt safe with. To start to get control of my life would have been amazing. I had created a life that most people dream about, but it was a front. It wasn't the truth, and I consented to play a game to deceive others by pretending that everything wasn't just okay, it was great. I was surrounded by people who wanted everything they could get from me. I also turned a blind eye to things I shouldn't have. This was all part of the self-image I was forcing myself to carry for others. It is never about blaming anyone. These are personal choices, and they were all part of very little choices that I made every day. I have nothing but love for everyone, including all of my family. I can clearly I can see clearly the part they were playing in challenging me to break out of those patterns that I was desperately trying to hold and I couldn't let go of. I was the golden child, the one everyone could count on, but I wasn't able to count on myself. It was all about being what other people thought I should be. So let's take a look at Stephen's chart and discuss what could have been going on and what was probably happening in his incarnation. So if I'm going to share my screen. So here we have Twitch. Hi, Twitch. She has such brilliant energy. I love this picture of him with the yellow. He was sunshine. I mean, I think everybody can agree. He was the epitome of a sunny disposition, showing his love for everybody. I don't think anybody had a bad word to say about Twitch. There isn't a mean bone in his body. He was a true empath. And there's much we can learn as empaths from him because when you look at a soul chart, and I often talk about this, this Star of David, which is Metatron's cube, it's sacred geometry, and the fact that we have our spiritual um, aspects because we are physical beings or spiritual beings having a human experience, and then we have our physical side. And so we, when somebody gets to be more midlife, these numbers start to really flow together because we're trying to open up to our spiritual side of the chart. So, what may have worked when we were younger starts to fall apart, and that is by design. Um, and so, the first thing I think we just need to really identify in this chart here are these. Fives in Stephen's challenges, and these are what we call karmic fives. And these are what I was talking about early. It's unusual for people to have fives in their chart. These are people who in prior lives struggle to assimilate into society, and so they come here to challenge themselves to be able to acclimate to society in a much better way. And of course, he did a wonderful job with that. But the issue that having these fives in challenges is tied to the fact that he was this great empath and that he would manifest fives manifest trauma. That is part of their life's journey, is to overcome it and to be able to learn a different perspective. And when you are a fives are all about freedom and independence. So again, he was a freestyle dancer, which is all tied into the fives. They're very much pioneer energies where they like to do their own thing, and he was doing his own thing. And so there's very inventive and creative individuals, but they also feel so deeply. And so they tend to take on, and I am a karmic five, these very happy, sunny dispositions, which is also tied to his four. I have a four as well. And so the four is tied to the sun. And, they can, get my dad would call me sunshine. And because we have this great, we just have this more optimistic outlook. However, there is a little bit of because of the childhood trauma where it starts to become a little toxic because as we all know, too much sugar is very toxic for you. So this overly niceness, this overly, you know, trying to make pleasers, I call them the people pleaser number, is really about being rooted in an environment that has trauma. So what does that mean? As children, we are made bad, we are made bad for, expressing ourselves, standing up for ourselves. We, we just can't be vulnerable. And especially for men, that is really hard. That's why I know, like I said, three men in their 40s that were pretty close to me that chose to leave because men are not allowed to be vulnerable. And this is something where the masculine in our society, we need to, it's a good time for men to start to redefine what masculine is because fives make you super sensitive. He was a highly, highly sensitive person. And like I said, he was feeling out energies because we do that to keep ourselves safe. And so we start to figure out that it's bad to be me. I can't express myself. So I'm going to be good and figure out what everyone else needs. I'm going to be the one to make sure everyone else is happy and then I'll be happy because that's my role is I'm going to do whatever I can to please other people. And it starts to become almost like this gift because you get really good at identifying what people want. And then you're able to meet those needs. And then you're able to be more of a high achiever like he was. So I did really well in school. I'm sure that Stephen probably did as well because you learn to feel into other people's energy and you watch and it becomes almost an obsession because it's your way of staying safe, it's your way of controlling your environment. And so but what happens is we're not meant to be here to be people pleasers. We're not meant here to just serve others. We're not meant to be selfish either. So there's this fine line that we're always walking with as empaths with sharing our upbeat energy with others and but not being overly nice in a way that is toxic to us. And what I mean by that is when you are being disrespected, not saying anything because, oh, you start making excuses for other people's bad behavior. Well, they didn't mean it, or, I'm just not going to say anything right now. And that's where empaths have to start to learn that boundaries can be very difficult for empaths because we're so open. And he was extremely open because not only did he have these five fives, which is very empathic, the 12-3, which is tied to love. And he just exuded love. It was his greatest gift was sharing of his love with others. And so he was so supportive and loving to everyone around him. But yet, what happens is that we're so busy trying, like he was saying, I gave and gave and gave, and I just couldn't make everyone happy because what happens is there's a neediness there. There's a neediness for validation that I'm doing the right thing by being nice to you. I'm giving to you. So you should be happy and you should be giving back to me. This should be a reciprocal arrangement. And that creates a lot of confusion and discord in the empath's body because we allow people to disrespect us, thinking that we're helping them by doing that, that we're not looking at we're not challenging that dark energy that we're projecting onto us. And so what do? We attract in people that want that from us, but don't feel they need to give it to us. And so that's where the imbalance occurs because a 12-3 is about coming into balance with these things in your life. And so is the 10-1. It's about balancing the masculine and feminine. It's about balancing your work life. It can't be this all or nothing. And the red flags that I was seeing, because I've done these things, they just stick out to me, was this over, everything was over the top. And if you are an empath, I beseech you to stop looking to other people as examples, because there's so much pantomime and there's so much acting in that. It's, you see it on, if you're on Facebook and you're looking at everybody, everybody is showing the best sides of themselves. Don't you wish you were like me? You know, I have this fancy house and all these great clothes, and you know, we're just so happy in love and blah blah blah. And it's over the top, is what I'm saying. It's, they were, him and his wife were on this Disney fairy tale marriages and weddings. It's not based in reality. These charts are, when you are working with other soul families, this is, you cannot always be in this state of happiness and everything is wonderful. That is fake. That is not reality. And it doesn't mean that they were at each other's throats. There just is something toxic about it, because that's not real life. Real life with 3 kids, demanding jobs. Um, think about everything that was on his shoulders. Just, you know, because this 4 too, I mean, his drive was about abundance, abundance, learning to manifest, learning to bring things in. And so when you get to your spiritual side, then you're to, you know, he's here to build a structure of truth. But it's also about him learning this self-respect, building his own structure of truth, building his own whatever that meant for him. And it doesn't mean that somebody can't be there with you, but you can't be so enmeshed that you lose yourself. You know, empaths lose themselves in relationships, and then it just becomes all about what the other person wants and not what we need. And somebody with vibes, they need their own space. I noticed so many interviews and things where him and his wife, where they were on top of each other. This is a very big red flag for someone who's a empath. And I had gone through this. I had this relationship, and this other person was the other end, you know, the narcissist, but narcissists are also very concerned about their image. And so when we were out, he would be the most loving and kind partner and show all this affection and say all these wonderful things. But as soon as we were alone, that it was like I was with another person. It was the most confusing thing. And I'm not saying that this is what was going on in Stephen's life, but I'm saying I saw an interview with him and his wife, and she had, and this was just when he knew that Ellen, this show that he had been on for quite some time, like 8 years, was coming to an end. And think of the, you know, 11s get very attached to things. It's hard for them to let go. And so change is a little difficult. And she someone asked him if they were going to have another baby, and his wife was like, "Oh, I would love another baby." And you could see he recoiled from her. There was this reaction, and that's not on her. You know, she was joking around and having fun, but I mean, you could almost see like, and he's like, "No," he started stuttering because his reaction was really visible. he pulled back and he was just, you could, I mean, he was like, no, no, like he could not take on one more thing. The pressure was showing if you really looked again. But of course, why would we look? He was saying the right things. He was doing the right things. I'm not saying this to blame anything, but I'm saying that's, with empaths, we're really good at pretending and covering for people and enabling this stuff and not challenging people. And so he was stuttering around instead of saying, I love children, but right now I think we are good. We're at the max. And I know Allison probably doesn't feel that way. It's about really being able to express yourself. And I feel like there was this dancing around, which empaths do because they don't want to poke the bear. They don't want to disappoint anybody because that's what they want. And I just saw a lot of things like that, a lot of things where if you watch them, because and you really shouldn't watch what people say, you should watch their actions more than anything. But sometimes you have to look at what people aren't saying and what people kind of how they word things as well, that can kind of give you an idea that something's a little off there. So he really wanted to come through all loving and just letting people know, please don't idolize what you think is some fairy tale perfect relationship because it's probably not. You need to create what you want in your life. And I am a big proponent of, I plan to do a video on this about how destructive marriage vows are. And these vows that you take and saying that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. I'm going to love you through sickness and health. And that is unfair. That is abandoning the self because you do not know what the future contains. You do not know how people change. You need to, this is for your own growth here. This isn't about growing together, with other people. These are the societal traps that keep people stuck in the matrix, and which we call the matrix. And it's having a wife and all these kids and consuming, 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 and making more and more money. When do you get off the wheel? And so then you get all this comes up because you're not really living your truth. And people who are empaths really struggle after a while if they aren't coming into the realization that, hey, something's wrong here. I need to rethink my life. I need to rethink why am I, pulling in certain people. I need to reevaluate my relationships. And it's not about being selfish, it's about being centered in self. Because when you are centered in self, you are the most powerful being. You are a healer. He had great healing energy. He's a service soul, and he talked about that. But I want to read to you what I saw this on his Facebook, and it was back in 2016, and he wrote this. The ego is a clever devil. Something I ask myself to keep it in check is, how may I be of service? That question takes me outside of myself and creates a perspective of how I can always do something to help. Not sure if this is something that someone needed to hear, but I felt compelled to share. Always let love lead and spread smiles. Peace. The issue that I have with this statement is this is how empaths are raised. They're raised to believe that we are here to think outside of ourselves and to help everyone else. Don't you think he was doing enough? How much more could this person do? So you have to ask yourself, is it in balance what I'm doing? And maybe he felt that because of all the abundance he was getting. There may be guilt associated. We have very weird ideas about money. We're raised with, people with threes are raised with this poverty consciousness, and that's by design. So, maybe he was like, why me? Why am I, have all of this abundance? So again, he was a service soul. He was giving. It's when you have to understand when there's over giving. And being an empath, you most likely are over giving. That message, like he was saying, was I feel like somebody needed to hear this. And it probably was somebody who's more on their narcissistic side, not him, but him saying, oh, how can I be of service? That's a really wonderful thing. But again, that isn't the best approach for empaths. The best approach for empaths is how can I respect myself and others at the same time? Because then we don't become doormats. Because when you are an empath and you're disrespected, you feel it. And so at that point, it's when you need to start expressing yourself and start defending yourself in that way. So I wanted to bring that up because and again, he seemed very steady, but the 11-2 can also be very much about mood imbalances. And the 2 can also be tied to a clouded judgment. And the clouded judgment then with the 5s can get very depressed, they're subjected heavily we're very light etheric beings, and when we come down into this dense place, we feel very bombarded. And so we can struggle with being very negative in our expression. And because he had a 12, 12s can hold a lot of self-judgment. So he can not only get very depressed, but he can be very hard on himself, and he would be blaming himself. And this again stems from that, being overly nice. I believe we should all be kind, not nice, because nice has this underlying neediness about it, about that is this toxic vibration of the too much sugar. So it's just something for you guys to think about. Why don't we? And that's really the most I wanted to say about the chart. I think we can get a clear idea. With the 5s can be very reckless and impulsive. And so it doesn't surprise me that this can happen. This is a tough place to be for an empath. And so we want to be doing our self-care. We want to be clearing our energy. So the first message that I'm going to go to is the Keepers of the Light. And so what is coming out is this beautiful card. Stephen, thank you. This is signs and reminders. Signs and reminders. And I am going to actually read that. And I see all of this transformation. So this is kind of like, I see this like cloud of smoke, and this almost seems like it's on fire. And remember, I don't know if you've watched any of my other videos, I talk about, are you setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm? Because what is eventually going to happen? And then you see this feather, the feather of the angels here. But I do want to read in this particular one because I'm being called to. So we've got angels and loved ones in heaven are sending you signs of their presence now. You may be seeing the same number patterns or sequences, finding feathers, seeing the same birds at special times, or even feeling that you're being visited by a loved one or angel in dreams or at some point in your day. These are all messages of support. You are on the right path, and you are being guided to know that you do not walk this path alone. And that's one thing he really wants to share. Those unseen forces, those angels and guides are with you. In times of need, angels are beside you, blessing your heart with love and healing, and your angels and loved ones in heaven will never leave you. Their love will never die. And so he really wants to say that you are not alone. And there's so much now on YouTube of like-minded people for you to connect with. There's so many of us trying to build communities where people can feel safe to express themselves. So please, if you are, and know that depression is a part of the journey. This is something we all came here to experience these emotions. And so, what is depressed? Deep rest, depressed, deep rest. It's telling you you need to take a step back. You need to go within. And it's not about being hard or those negative thought forms. It's about getting recentered into where am I going? What do I want out of life? It's asking some deeper questions, not in a way that, oh, look at where I'm in. I'm this old and I haven't, you know what I mean? This victim, this I'm not doing anything right. It's resting. Your body needs rest. We have all these upgrades and downloads we're going through. We're going through huge changes in our environments right now. There's so much instability with people, and I know you guys are feeling that. So rest is needed, a much needed recharging is needed, like Stephen had said, because then the transformation happens. It happens during the depression when you're in the cocoon and you are, and if you try to open a cocoon too soon, the butterfly dies because it has to build the strength to break out of the cocoon before it can become the butterfly. So you have to keep letting those struggles and things make you stronger. They shouldn't break you, but we don't blame when people choose to leave. There's no punishment for that. We don't need to feel shame that if somebody in your family, it is, again, we don't know everything. We don't know that could have been planned. We do not know. So it isn't for us to judge. So the guide card came out because he was very much a guide. He was, the threes in his chart was all about leadership. He was such a great leader and he was teaching people. He was doing so many things, wonderful things in his chart. So the light attribute of the guide is represents the nature of the divine in life and in yourself. And I think he was a great representation of this. But the shadow side of being a guide is it placing the financial gain and control over imparting spiritual insight. So the shadow side is it becomes all about money. It becomes phony. It becomes this facade. And so there was a little bit of that struggle he was going on between why am I doing this? Taking all these sponsorships and doing this. Was this really in alignment with who he was? And those are the deeper questions. Was somebody pushing him to do these things because they wanted the financial gain? His family, his partner, you know, that doesn't make them bad or anything like that. But it's why we have to reevaluate our relationships. We need to do vow breaks. We need to allow ourselves to grow and it doesn't have to be like society tells us to be. And I know he had some grandparents that were married for over 50 years. So even say he was thinking about his relationship wasn't working out. I mean, he couldn't probably even get his mind around the disappointment or the failure he would feel, no matter how maybe if the relationship was bad. I'm not saying that it was. I'm just saying there were some cracks showing. Ah, and so here is another beautiful card. I love all of this. Beautiful purple, everything purple coming out. That's very much a higher, very much high ascended master type energy. And obviously, look at what he accomplished in his short life of 40 years. Wish wisely. Use your wishes wisely to manifest your heart's desire and take practical steps towards making your dreams come true. So he's encouraging people. He was following his dreams. His beautiful movement, which is tied to the fives. The fives are all about your vehicle, but you can be very sensitive to foods and you can have allergies and things like that. So it's very, very much to pay attention to the vehicle, but it's all about movement and he just, with fives, you want to move. Don't want to be um, you know, it's not about flexibility as much as it's just about using the body. And he figured out his way and he did it on, that pioneer energy, doing those unique things. Um, but yes, so he's guiding you to take, you still have to take, if you have dreams, you can't sit and just sit back and they're gonna fall into place. You have to take those mundane steps, then do them every day and keep holding the vision and keep dreaming about not a hope of where you want to be. Be careful about hopes, is you want to feel how it would feel if you were there. Jim Carrey was a great, can really put it into perspective because he used to actually visualize him getting an Oscar and how he would feel if this happened and how he would feel. And he eventually manifests that because you have to be able to manifestation, you have to be able to connect all of those together. If you're projecting it out into the future, it just stays out into the future. So you have to feel that it is happening now. It's just a little manifestation trick. But let's go to the wisdom of the oracle. And there's also something about always being positive when you are not honoring your dark side. That just came through from him. And building blocks. So, and this is 28, which is 10, which is the 10 in his chart was also about self-mastery. And he did master the dance beautifully, which was another accomplishment of his. And so he's talking about these building blocks. What building blocks are you putting together? Because you want this to be your representation of your dream and not someone else's representation. That's what I'm getting. The building blocks are your building blocks. Otherwise, it will come crashing down on you. Um, so we're going to go to, ah, the map maker of destiny. The map maker of destiny is the soul contractor because it's your map and your purpose is the destiny written in the numbers, but it's about authentic purpose, inspiration, and free will. And so this has a 2 and a 4, which was in his chart. And you see he's creating his map. So it's good to know your map, good to know where you're going, but not getting attached to the outcome because those 11 twos, they can get very attached. And it's all about learning the cycles, these life to death cycles, the cycle of a relationship, the cycle of, it was coming to an end with Ellen. He was at a 9 years with his wife. That is an end of a cycle as well. So either you renew the cycle or you end the cycle. So it's about learning about these cycles and when they need to be renewed, but also when they need to be ended. So that's another thing he wanted to say. So we are going to pick Keepers of the Light again. I think I called that other deck that, but this is, and Mercury is open communication. Get a weight off your chest, speak up with love, and be heard. So for those of you that are holding on to this notion that you can't speak up or that you'll disappoint and those types of things, or that you'll hurt somebody's feelings, that is just enabling. It's enabling people to be stuck. And so you see this, I think it's called a caduceus, but the serpents here is kind of a medical thing too. So if you aren't communicating, this is the sign that, this is where sickness comes from, this lack of expression, this um, not being heard. It just builds up resentment and it builds up a lot of negativity. So yeah, he wanted to bring that through. I think that's a perfect message for him. And so we're going to go to the elemental oracle to see what, just get a few more here. And the rain. And so the rain is so cleansing. Fecundicity. Fecund, fecundity? I've never heard of that. I'm going to look in this book as well because I've never heard that word. It's Fecundity. Fecundity? Anyhow. Um, and this is about, I've got to figure out what this is about because that is just different. I always struggle with this book because of how it's not really, the table of contents is hard to follow. Okay, here we go. Fecundity. Sorry, you guys. The condition of greater prosperity. The conditions of greater prosperity are being met. Know that all will be well. Cleanse yourself of old, outdated views. You have everything you need to grow. Let yourself be cleansed. It means fruitfulness. So it is tied to his fours, which is about abundance. The sound of rain on leaves on a tin roof, which I love. The sweet smell of rain as it hits the thirsty earth after a hot day. The simple pleasures of life. You soon know how much rain contributes to the balance and health of a land. You haven't had any for a long time. You also understand how much it contributes to the positive mental health of communities that have been locked in drought states for a considerable length of time. Rain is liquid water from the atmosphere that has become heavy enough to fall under gravitational pull. It is part of the life-giving water cycle and is the main supplier of fresh water to land. Raindrops can vary in size due to temperature and the rate of coalescence. The amount of rain helps form biomes and ecosystem. Without rain, we have less fruitfulness. Plant life, particularly plants that supply food, do not thrive without rain or irrigation. Drought affects animals and pollinators such as fruit bats and bees. Some biomes are wetter than others and have almost constant rainfall, such as rainforest. Human intervention has influenced rain patterns. Particles of solid or liquid matter suspended in the air can increase cloud condensation and trigger a rain event. Man-made global warming is also affecting rain patterns, with some areas becoming drier and some becoming more intense rainfall. But this also is about the cleansing that we need to do in crying, in grieving, in cleansing of the soul. It is really super, super important to be able to go to these lower emotions and to purge them, to transmute them, to feel them. And then the final card, because he was a 10-1 with, we'll go to the self-mastery deck by Metatron. Aha. And here comes in more purple again, and it's untying the karmic knots. 28, which is 10. 10 is karma. And so that's karmic knots are just, those are things we bring in, with us and that we're trying to unravel here. And it's really important for us to untangle them, to start looking at, so what is your karma? It's your opportunity for growth. It's what's holding you back. What beliefs are you holding on to that no longer serve you? It's the balancing of everything is karma. balancing your life in a way that is sustainable for everybody. And that is all part of self-mastery, you know, the self-love and the nurturing that is so important, but it's so hard for empaths to, you're like, stop, just love yourself. They're like, no, it's really hard. It's hard when your whole life you've been trained to please others. It takes quite a while to start breaking those patterns. So that's all it is starting to untie them, letting them unravel. And so I thank Stephen for being here to talk about such a dark subject and to shed a little bit light on what he was going through. And he's wishing everybody well. And there was one more quote that he had pointed out about for me to kind of end this with, and it was, a person who truly loves you is someone who sees the pain in your eyes while everyone else believes the smile on your face. And so I guess maybe we're all to blame, and yet none of us are to blame. So we're all connected, and it is what it is. We just want to share great love with one another. And so I love you. I care about you. You always have somebody watching over you, somebody cheering you on from the other side. So don't ever forget that. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next video.